Good evening, everyone, and good afternoon. And yeah, my name is Chef Tebo Khoramatsui, and I'm a demand creation chef out here at Unilever, South Africa, based in Gauteng. And yeah, we've got quite a packed session today. And I would like to introduce my guests that we will be having a discussion with today. And yeah, so first off, I would like to start by introducing Guinea Pasha, who is a board member of SADAG. And Guinea is a medical scientist specializing in hematology and has spent 10 years in the medical and pharmaceutical industry. And second, we have Dr. Bronwyn Drozarowski Fenter, who is a senior research associate at the University of Johannesburg and is also a lead researcher and investigator at the University of the Western Cape Student Mental Health and Wellness Project. And she's also co-chair of Menkosa Research and Ethics Committee. And then we have Chef Art Leda, who is based out in the US Foods, Unilever. He's a culinary and sales development chef at United States Food and active with FairKitchens ambassador as well. And I think we can kick off, and then looking forward to the session today. Bronwyn, are you there?
I'm here. Would you like me to maybe just kick off with some discussion of our survey findings, Chef?
Yes, please proceed with the survey findings,
Wonderful.
just to start off.
Happy to do so. Thank you very much. Thanks everyone for joining us. You know, it's a Wednesday, sorry, it's a Thursday evening here in South Africa. I'm a day early, and I'm trying to be early enough for our American counterparts, but now I'm perhaps too early. It's wonderful to have you all joining us, no matter what your location or your time zone. You know, I was very, very fortunate to be brought on board to the SADAG Working Life Research Survey. And it was something that we wanted to do for quite some time. You know, looking at what was going on in the global north, we obviously noticed the post-COVID great resignation. And we looked at Gallup polls, which told us that 88% of US workers in 2021 were completely stressed out. We looked at UK studies where we see that 1 in 5 individuals are taking time off work due to mental health problems. Then we turn to the International Labour Organization, and they say that workplace stress is a global epidemic. It's the new epidemic after COVID-19. And so we sort of said to ourselves, it's so important to talk to South African workers and find out what people in our SADAG online community who are really employed and therefore quite privileged in the South African context where high unemployment is quite an issue. And just sort of ask people how they're doing and if COVID-19 impacted their workplaces and how they were feeling. But you know, at SADAG, we were in a really great position because we'd done some fascinating research during our compulsory power cuts period, where we were all being load shed every couple of hours. And we also had some data from our COVID-19 research. And that showed us that work stress was quite a continuous stressor for the general working population in South Africa. So we thought, well, maybe after COVID-19, workplaces had shifted and changed in exciting ways, and maybe mental health was put on the agenda. Unfortunately, what we found was that, well, 52% of our sample were diagnosed with a mental health condition. Only 20% had ever taken leave for mental health issues. And only 12% had ever been granted a so-called mental health day in a sort of preventative kind of a way. So that was a bit concerning. What was also really interesting is we thought, right, COVID, mental health crisis. After COVID, we're going to see that COVID did dreadful things to our mental health. And it's not to suggest that COVID had no impact on our mental health, but we found only 8% of our sample felt really impacted. In other words, felt that their existing mental health condition had been worsened by COVID. And quite a few people had written us asides on the questionnaire saying things like, lockdown was the best thing that ever happened to me. I'm an anxious person. Work stresses me out more than anything. It was wonderful to be at home with family. It was wonderful to reconnect. It was good to be away from work. Work is the stressor. Work is the stressor. So this was sort of the message that was coming through. And as this message was coming through to us, we wondered why people were so stressed. And we sort of looked a little bit deeper into the results. And the reason why this is interesting is because if we look at the results globally, and then we hone in on the hospitality sector, we don't really have huge quantities of hospitality sector workers in our sample. And a big reason for that is because, as one of our workers said, I'm always in the kitchen. I barely had time to complete this 10-minute survey, between courses. I couldn't get to it. I wished I could have done more. So even though we don't have a lot of hospitality workers, we can make some kind of comparison to what the general sort of South African workforce told us and what hospitality workers were telling us. So one of the general trends was that 75% of ordinary South African workers who were non-hospitality sector workers said, I can't switch off. I'm always thinking about work when I'm not at work. It's a really big struggle. Now, when we compared that to hospitality sector workers, we saw that 61% of them said, I can't switch off. So we think, wow, hospitality sector workers are amazing. They're psychologically well adjusted. They can switch off when they leave the workplace. No, it's really not about switching off. It's about sleeping. It's about always being in the workplace and then sleeping and not really doing much else when you're away because you're constantly on. So I don't think it's a case that hospitality workers are less or more likely to switch off. It's more a case of how their work is structured. And so when they're not at work, there isn't an opportunity to not think about work because they're just too tired. What's also very interesting is that while many South African workers that we sampled were really afraid of losing their jobs, 61% said, I wish I could afford to quit my job. My job is the major source of stress in my life. I'd love to not have to work. Well, hospitality sector workers had them beat. There were a much higher number, I wouldn't say much higher, but certainly 5 or 6% more of hospitality sector workers said, I'd like to be able to afford to quit my job. Now we wonder why that sort of takes place in their minds. It's interesting that we saw quite a few, and by quite a few, I'd say about 50% of general South African workers in the sample said, I trust my boss. I can talk to my line manager about sensitive topics. Hospitality sector workers were not massively different. About 1 in 2 were saying something similar, that they could talk to their boss about sensitive issues. So then what's going wrong? What are the differences? What are we seeing? Well, when it came to employee assistance programs, one of the hospitality workers in our sample said, mental health is not a priority in my workplace. Another one said, there are no safe spaces for us to talk about our experiences. Another one said, could employers give us the tools to deal with mental health crises and our problems? So we see that in the normal sort of, when I say normal, the normative non-hospitality sector workforce, the general number was around about 47% had employee assistance programs. When you just hone in on the hospitality sector, that number plummets to 22%. So what they were saying to us is also being sort of almost verified in the numbers, in the statistics. So, we thought it'd be really interesting to ask workers, how do you feel when you start your working week? What's your level of happiness? And we gave them a bar. And right on the one side, it was 0 level happiness, and all the way across to 100%. And we found that when it came to hospitality sector workers, when there were hospitality sector workers who had mental health issues, things that had been previously diagnosed, that happiness level was very low to start work. Now, generally speaking, 5 in 10 across the conventional sort of non-hospitality part of the sample said, well, I don't feel like going to work on a Monday morning. And so it's not as if all South African workers are delighted to be going to work on a Monday morning, but it is to say that there were hospitality sector workers that actually said 0. I feel 0 happiness at going to work on a Monday morning. And for this particular hospitality sector worker that I'd like to hone in on, she's a full-time worker, aged 25 to 35. She didn't give us her specific age, just an age category. She was the one that said that she was always in the kitchen. She'd been diagnosed previously with a panic disorder. And when we say diagnosed, it's not self-diagnosed. It's a professional diagnosis that she's struggling with day in and day out. She says that she has a very physically uncomfortable working environment, but she's only ever taken leave when she feels physically ill. But when her panic disorder kicks in, she doesn't take any leave at all. She truly wishes that she could quit her job. She wishes that she could talk to her boss about her mental health. But while other hospitality sector workers said, yeah, my boss is okay, I can talk to my boss, she couldn't talk about anything in the workplace at all. And there's no employee assistance program in her workplace. She was particularly stressed. So we popped in the Kessler 10-item psychological distress scale, just to sort of give people 10 items and give us a sense of, you might have a diagnosis, but how do you feel now? How do you feel when you're filling in this questionnaire? And she felt incredibly distressed on every single metric. So that was something for us to perhaps consider. There was another case of a young man also working full time in the hospitality sector in South Africa, a little bit younger, aged 18 to 25, a little bit happier to be at work. So he sort of came in around 47% happy when he starts his working week. So he was sort of in the middle. He wasn't feeling too bad. He wasn't feeling too awful. He doesn't have a mental health diagnosis, but he also says, I don't get paid enough. And so he was under immense amounts of financial pressure. And like his counterpart, like the woman that we talked about at first, the female chef, he felt to a large extent that he had conflict with colleagues and no one was doing anything about it. Then we had a third and final case. She is absolutely deliriously happy to be at work. She's 74% happy. She's an intern. She's new to the profession. She's not super young in the sense that she's 25 to 36 in that same age range. So she's probably doing a career shift, but she's also struggling on the ground. And the reason why she's struggling, even though she's got an employee assistance program in place and a mental health friendly boss, no time. She has absolutely no time to join the employee assistance program and get help. And her issue, just like her colleagues, is she's struggling to integrate. She's struggling relationally. And, it's such an important finding this because all the happiness research, whether you're happy at work, happy at home, happy anywhere, is really that you're only as happy as your unhappiest relationship. So it's really important for us to think about mental health in the hospitality sector around co-workers, around social support networks, and around giving people time to actually use the resources that are there. So you can see that there's a full spectrum of findings to reflect upon and to think about ways in which maybe stigma works or doesn't work in the hospitality sector. So I think I'll keep it short and sweet and stop there. Thank you, Chef.
Thank you, Doctor. Guinea, is it possible that maybe you can help us to maybe understand what stigma exactly is, how we can define it to understand it?
Absolutely, and I think it's quite critical that we define first and foremost what stigma is and understand how that then obviously gets into or fits into the discussion that we are having today. So stigma is really a very strong sense of negative judgment or disapproval that most people in a society will have. So a marked or significant disapproval that is associated either with a person or with a circumstance, and we know that if there is stigma associated to something, then people see that as, something that is actually, negative, something that is a taboo, in the society, and really something to be ashamed of. So now we know that there are key components, to stigma. So we look at stereotypes / myths, that really drive, stigma. Labeling, quite a big one. You get given names, and I think we'll get into that as we proceed with our discussion. Discrimination, and of course, social division, and sort of the status that comes with it. So I think in a nutshell, that sort of, speaks or rather defines, what stigma really is.
Wow, thank you so much. Chef Art, would you like to maybe add your observations of, what you've seen in the industry from your experience?
Of course. Thank you, Chef. Thank you so much for having me part of this panel. I'm super excited to be a representative here from the States, but it's true. Stigma, Nikina, you summed it up perfectly. the word of judgment. You know, we were discriminated against. I've seen both the negative aspect of stigmas and talking about mental health, but I've also seen the positive aspect. And what we're doing here right now, we're moving that needle into the more positive aspect. We're creating more safe spaces. We're creating more conversations that's allowing us to break away from the stigmas, the judgment, the labeling, the bullying, the questioning of, is this individual right for my kitchen? Is this individual right for our staff? Like, those are some of the things I have experienced on the negative aspect when dealing with my own mental health. But on the positive side, I was able to express what I was going through to one of my chefs. And it clearly made a positive reaction when he was not only sympathetic, but also empathetic because of his own challenges that his family was going through. So, you know, we are definitely seeing a shift on the positive side, but we are still fighting that fight, that good fight against the stigmas and stereotypes that mental health has within our industry as a whole.
Oh, thank you, Chef.
Yeah,
And
and
Kenny,
I think maybe if I come in, just really, I think Art has really touched on, or rather brought in the part of the discussion, linking, stigma and how that relates to mental health. I think, Dr. Bronwyn also spoke about the figures, but if you just look in the South African context and mental health and stigma, now we know that stigma, it is that huge barrier, to getting mental health, help, to presenting, getting the diagnosis, and of course, then the treatment that comes along with it. In South Africa, a third of our population is actually living with a type of a mental health condition. Out of that, only 75% are actually getting, help for their mental health. And we know that at least only 10% out of that 75% are actually getting proper management and treatment for their mental health. So you can see just the huge issue that we are dealing with, the severe consequence of stigma. And we know that, of course, if a mental health condition prolongs and is not treated, that then leads to a very lethal, consequence, and that is suicide, unfortunately.
Yeah, that's the sad part, I must say, because we've seen, quite a lot of those in our industry, and yeah, it's quite a very heartbreaking thing to go through, and especially with someone that you're close to and that you've shared moments with prior to them taking their lives, and you have no answers, and you just carry on asking yourself as to what could have gone wrong. And yeah, it's not a nice space to be in. Well, wow. Doctor, would you like to maybe, maybe take us through what consequences, just to expand further, can further,
Absolutely.
yeah.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think Nkini's given us the ultimate consequence, isn't it? And I think that it actually comes back to my survey findings to some extent, because think about it. You've got this great desire to quit, but you have this absolute fear of losing employment because there isn't alternative employment. And so those two pressures continuously push down on the person, and you get this cognitive dissonance of, I want to leave, but I'm privileged to be here. I need to go, but I need to stay. I have bills to pay, but my mental health is suffering. So I think it's really important for us to recognize that the consequences are obviously dreadful and tragic, but there are additional consequences. So, for example, if you don't treat a mental health condition and you don't have it diagnosed quite early on, it becomes like a tar baby, and another one comes, and another one comes, and another one comes. So you could be experiencing, let's say, for example, symptoms that you don't understand, but you're under a particular amount of economic stress, and then you're under work stress, then you're under family stress, and it all piles on. And when that all piles on, something starts to be revealed, and you start to act in ways that you haven't acted before, and you start to be less resilient. And all of a sudden, somebody decides that you need to see a doctor, and off you go to the doctor, but you don't tell anyone, and you're afraid to go. and maybe you can't have time off work to go, so you have to pretend that it's for something else or whatever. So it becomes this pile-on, isn't it, of deception after deception, because you just want to keep that spoiled identity. I always think of this sociologist Irving Goffman, who talks about a stigmatized person as a spoiled identity. And so it's a social thing, but it also becomes a very personal thing. And so what happens is that then we don't treat that sort of emerging mental health condition. Let's say, for example, it's a mood disorder or a personality disorder that's coming out under stress. And then we get anxious, and then we do something, and then we do something that's wrong. Perhaps we do something that gets us a verbal warning or a written warning in the workplace. And then we start to experience the trauma of unemployment, and then we get another job, but we've still got that other trauma attached. And so you see it becomes a tar baby. It's a pile-on. And the more we pile on, the harder it is to treat. If you think about it, if you've got stage 1 liver cancer, it's tragic, but it's far more treatable than stage 4. And with these mental health conditions, it becomes stage 1, stage 2, stage 3, stage 4 very, very quickly. Then, as I said before, we're only as happy as our unhappiest relationship. And when we don't treat our mental health conditions, what starts to happen? People drop out of our lives. We start having problems with colleagues at work. We start having problems at home. We start having problems with friends. We don't maintain our social support network. And so all the people that would be needed in a treatment plan for something quite serious, like suicide ideation, for example, the people aren't there. And so you then eventually have to deal with it on your own. So some of these consequences are social, they're economic, and they're psychological, and it's really just a pile-on.
And I mean, I think if also we look at, maybe the different types of stigma as well. And, I think oftentimes, yes, we look at stigma as, an external. So it's public stigma. You have stigma by association, for example. And this is one of the things that you find that families of somebody who takes away their lives, they don't want to actually talk about it because it's stigma by association. But you also then have systemic stigma, within, the workplace, for example. But I think what is also very, very crucial, it is that self-stigma. So I know that I might potentially be suffering from a type of a mental health condition, but I actually stigmatize myself. I see myself as being, as a man, less of a man, for example, that I'm weak. Why am I actually experiencing this? I shouldn't be, it's an African. For example, and I know, I think it's part of what we will touch on as we proceed. So that self-stigmatization as well, it's quite a huge, component of this discussion as well.
I think to add on to that with the stigmas prevent an individual seeking out help. The stigmas hold back that individual because of the fact they're questioning, wait, what is going on with me? I'm okay. I can handle this. I'm a man. I can handle this. But in actuality, you need to shed that ego and really put forth the effort to make sure that you are okay. Because if you don't take care of yourself, how can you expect as a chef to take care of others as well? And, through my own experiences, when I started having my mental health challenges, I started to listen to the stigmas. I started to pay more attention to them and think, no, what's wrong with me? That I shouldn't be having these emotions. I should control these. But it got to a point where a consequence could have happened. And I said, you know what? That's it. I need to get help. I need to shed my ego of a male and say, I need help. And that's some of the hardest things, I think, within our industry, especially as a minority and as a male, because we're always taught you have to be strong, you have to be tough. But to shed that persona really is really enlightening. It opens up who you are as an individual, but it also allows you then to see within yourself, hey, it's okay to have these emotions. It's okay to not be okay and have these mental health issues because I'm human. And finding out what you can do, how you can get yourself help, talking to the right individuals, creating those safe spaces, breaks through that stereotype, breaks through those challenges. And it has been such a great movement that we're seeing now, especially with FairKitchens, yourselves, everyone right now, especially what we're seeing within the industry, how much more people are open to talk about their mental health challenges, how much more people are willing to listen and accept. And I think we're breaking through that barrier. It is slow, it's tough, but we are breaking through those barriers of stigmas to really to put those people back on that peak, so to say.
Yeah.
Oh, great. Very true, Chef.
Chef Tebogo, can I jump in there as well? I
Yes,
think
please.
what both Nkini and Chef Art are saying is so important. So there are two barriers, right? So there's the stigma, there's the self-stigma. You've got to overcome that. And then you might have the stigma in the organization, and you have to overcome that. But I think that there's another sort of slight facet to this, and it's sort of present in the findings as well. It's that once you overcome yourself and you say, right, I need to go and get treatment, that's well and good, but sometimes stigma isn't the only access barrier. In other words, it wasn't just between you and getting help, but it was also in terms of how much money the organization puts into providing that help to make sure that that help is available. So for us, for example, in our public sector, we are in big trouble in terms of the ratio of mental health professionals to individuals who need help. And I think Nkini was pointing that out really well. So I think for me, it's one thing to overcome stigma, and it's crucial and it's a necessary first step. But if that stigma sits in the mind of your employer, and your employer is the one who's setting the budgets, and there aren't any employee assistance programs, then it's really hard to get the help, and it must be really frustrating, I should imagine, particularly in the hospitality sector, which was hardest hit by COVID. So I can go to the head of an organization or even a restaurant and say, hey, we need money for EAP. And they'll say, well, do I keep the doors open, or do I have EAP, or do I retrench people, or do I have EAP? So it's a really complex balancing act. And if you've got this latent stigma inside of you where you just don't see mental illness as a priority, it's very easy to allocate the money to something else. But sometimes it's not about stigma. Sometimes it's just literally about how much money you have to spend.
Well, that's a great point.
No,
The
very, very
financial
good point.
situation of restaurateurs is, we know it as chefs. We're always looking at our books. We're making sure that we are profitable. We want to make sure the lights are on. We're paying our employees, paying our vendors. But you're right, to put finances to the side for EA programs, or just an hour, like we're talking an hour for us, is definitely a financial challenge. But I think there's ways that we can find and create smart ways to have it where it's minimal in terms of costs, but it is maximum in terms of positive reaction.
Yeah, exactly.
No, most definitely. So yeah, it is quite a challenging topic here, because I'm just, in my mind, I'm just going through a lot of things that have happened in the past that I went through. I've seen people go through. And Nkini, what do you think? Especially we have our traditional and social expectations and challenges. How do we we navigate that in dismantling stigma and mental health?
And I mean, it really starts, I'll say from the basics. I mean, it's really how, we are socialized, first and foremost. That really then, drills into us certain beliefs, certain myths, in our view of life and how we actually navigate, through life. As a boy child, and I think Art did touch on this as well, that as a boy child, you are raised to believe that, tigers don't cry, in Sepedi, we will say, Monna ol. So, tigers don't cry. So you're expected to live up to this, masculinity gold standard, as a man. And we know that also, there are myths, religious beliefs even, and cultural, traditional beliefs where mental health conditions are often associated, be it with witchcraft, that if you are having a type of a mental health condition, you have been bewitched. You either have demonic, or you've got demons, in your system. So there is that, strong sense, of those beliefs, and that then takes away from the opportunity for the person to actually get the proper medical attention and treatment that they so need. You know, in some segments, and I did mention earlier on that, you know, you've often heard that as an African person, as a Black person, as a Black male, you know, person in this society, that it is un-African to suffer from a type of a mental, you know, health condition. We've seen a couple of years ago, you know, one prominent leader that really stood up and actually said, well, you know what, stress is un-African. You know, so these are the type of you know, challenges that, you know, that the myths, the stereotypes that fuel, you know, the stigma. And that then prevents people from really feeling comfortable to come forward and, you know, to get diagnosed and to get the management and the treatment and, you know, for their mental health condition.
Kina, you said something, comfortability. That rings with me. Why? It's because being able to be comfortable enough in your own skin and then comfortable with the environment that you are in to express yourself. That is a challenge, especially as male individuals in this industry. We are always taught, like you said, a tiger doesn't cry, a lion always roars, right? But we have to shed those thought process. We have to shed those myths, because we are seeing now an uptick, not only in just mental health challenges within our hospitality industry, but also the consequences. You know, we've lost many individuals throughout this entire process, and it's very heartbreaking. But I think the more we talk about the myths and break through them, the more we talk about support from everyone in all different facets, and also giving that data. That data will ring so strong within individuals, especially within leaders of the kitchen, hospitality, restaurant owners and operators themselves. By giving this information, we definitely can break through that myth. We can create that safe space. You know, it's just something that I know that we as a whole, as a collaboration, can do, and I know we're going to do this.
Well, now,
and I think also, you know, there's also, I mean, it's quite also ironic because, you know, yes, as let's say the owner of the restaurant, you want to have your staff complement there, you know, to drive the business. But when you have somebody or you have employees that are actually battling mental health conditions, the level of productivity, you know, goes down. So although you might have your employees at work, there is something that we call presentism. You know, so you're there, but you are actually not operating at your absolute optimal. You know, so that is also not good for the business. You know, so I think it's a whole paradigm shift, you know, that needs to happen. You know, from the employers, you know, perspective, you know, business owners, to really understand that, you know, you can actually get so much more by ensuring that your team, your staff complement is actually mentally healthy.
No, definitely. Doctor, I was just wondering, is there a way we can use, because, you know, as we all know, social media is quite big and influencers are everywhere, left, right, and center. Is there a way we can use, you know, those platforms and also those individuals constructively into encouraging people to speak out and come out and, you know, to you know, to talk about what they are going through, their mental issues or any anxiety issues?
That's such a great question. I mean, I think social media is a necessary evil in everybody's lives, but it's necessary and it's present. And when something is pervasive, we must use it. We must turn it into something good. You know, when I think about the way that stigma works in levels, I always think social media is doing a brilliant job in terms of certain influencers coming out and saying, here's my lived experience. You know, all those lived experience ambassadors saying, this is what's wrong with me. This is how long it took me to get treated. This is my journey. So I think that that's fantastic when we're talking about that self-stigma and at that primary stigma level. In other words, me and my mental health. They're doing a fantastic job. But I do think that we need to be a little bit cautious in terms of how we approach this, because often a social media influencer has got 1 million followers and is able to monetize a particular product or a particular resource, or is able to be sponsored in terms of their medication, or in terms of, you know, even a source of help or a particular clinic or a place to go. So I think that, you know, they've got to also think a little bit about their positionality in life. what is their relative privilege compared to the ordinary person who they're sort of talking to. So, I've been sort of looking at different individuals, and the ones that I find the most inspiring are the ones that say, here's a discount code. You can go and see this clinic or this hospital, or this is how you make the time, or these are the negotiation skills that you need when you're talking to your boss if you need time off. People that give concrete and tangible help to you. I think that that's really important. But what I've also noticed is that some influencers don't always think ahead about the quality of the resource that they're offering. So I would just sort of say social media is powerful, and we can look at that. But then we have to look at intertwined gender norms, right? So if we're looking at our social media influencers, you're going to see many more females talking about their mental health and their lived experience than men. But when men do, their voices are amplified. So that's really important to recognize that sometimes gender role norms can be useful. If the male voice is more amplified in social media, let's use it. But then we have to be very careful. So tigers don't cry. Neither do girls in power suits. Remember something, if I want to be equal to a man, I need to have the emotional complexus of a man. So if I run around talking about my emotions and my mental health, no one's really going to listen. Remember something, I cook every night in the kitchen. I'm not a chef. I'm not wearing whites. But the chef in the kitchen has authority. And the chef in the kitchen is usually a man. And so how does he navigate keeping his authority, and how do I get to his level of authority if I don't act like a man myself? So that gender role norm is catching all of us. And so in social media, it would be so powerful to see more and more men speaking out about the difficulties in their journey, how hard it was to overcome the self-stigma, and then also maybe thinking carefully about the resources that we recommend.
Barnes,
You
what
know,
you
I'm
just
glad
said
to
is
bring
so
it in.
powerful.
Absolutely. And I think if we then look at the gender, dimension, men versus women, and how that compares, in terms of mental health conditions. Us as men, we are not socialized to be expressive, of our emotional and psychological distress. It is really frowned upon. It is a taboo, for me to really come out and to be seen to be crying or even just expressing my emotions. So this is really a huge deterrent for us as men. One, to acknowledge and accept that, I could potentially be suffering from a type of a mental health condition, and to come forward to get help. What we are seeing in statistics is that you see more women being counted in statistics compared to men. And you see more women perhaps attempting to, end their lives, through suicide. But with men, when you look at the means that men actually take or engage in suicide are much more lethal.
Yes.
And also, unfortunately, we have seen cases where men not only take away their own lives, but they commit what we call family suicides. So they will, wipe out their families and then, tend to themselves and, end their, life for themselves. So it's a really a huge, problem in our society. And as you say, Dr. Bronwyn, more and more voices of men, must be amplified, must be out there to say, we are also as human. We, first and foremost, I'm a human being. And as a human being, I have, feelings, I have emotions, I have, all of that. Having a particular gender does not actually make me immune, to mental health conditions.
That's
Very
a great
true.
point.
Very true.
Like the fact that the male population doesn't have a voice. And that's the thing. We need to have that voice stronger, amplified, as you said, to be more compassionate, to be more, to create the movement, to continue this movement. I mean, we're having it now. We're having these conversations right now, which is great. But how do we as males continue down this road? How do we as the males be leaders, especially in the mental health industry, to make sure that other men feel comfortable enough in their skin to express themselves, to cry, to have those emotions? I finally have become more comfortable in my skin through my own therapy, and it's an amazing uplifter. It's enlightening to be able to cry, to be able to say you're sad, to be able to say, hey, I need to take time for me mentally because I'm not right. But those are the things that we need to encourage more within the gender, just encourage more within our population. Encourage those conversations, encourage individuals to listen more and not judge. That is one of the biggest things that I've been as a challenge was the judgment, the stigmas of that judgment. And you're right. The more we do this as males within this discussion, we have to amplify it. We have to talk more. So then it allows other men and boys that see, holy cow, look at these individuals. These are men. These are leaders within our industry that are suffering the same things that I am, that are expressing emotions through tears. Wait a minute. So then if that's okay for them, it's okay for me. That's what we need to encourage more of.
No, definitely, Chef. Definitely, most definitely. And yeah, I think it has such a big impact when, as you say, someone in a position of authority or who is prominent coming out and expressing, their weaknesses or, any emotional issues that they're dealing with. And it does, help encourage others to also, see the need to also open up. Thank you for that, Chef. And Chef, just one thing here just popped up in my mind. Why do you think, especially in our industry, it is so prevalent, for chefs that, I mean, it's been spoken about for so many years, but why do you think in our industry it's still, lingering around, why chefs are still going through, anxiety and mental issues, in the workplace?
I think the challenge is the ego. For one, it's the ego of this male-dominated industry of, I got to be the best. I got to be tough. I've got to sacrifice everything in order for me to reach the next goal of what I want in terms of representation in this industry. We need to shed those egos. We really need to encourage more conversations in our establishments. We've talked about an hour for us. We do pre-shifts. We do post-shifts. We have once a week meetings with our entire staff to talk about the menu, anything of service wise. Why isn't that we give an hour of our day to talk about our mental health challenges? Those are things that we need to encourage as well within our industry to kind of help break through that ego of, I can't be weak. I cannot shed a tear. I cannot show that I'm crying because of the fear of the judgment, the fear of losing my position on the line, the fear of questioning my abilities. That whole encompasses the negativity that we're trying to shed, that we're trying to break through. And the more we conversate, the more we talk, the more we have these open discussions, I feel so strongly that we are going to break through that. We're going to break through that stereotype and stigma, those challenges of, I can't express myself. No. I need you to express yourself so I get the best of you on the line. I get the best of you every day. And those are some of the things that I know as a team, as individuals, as leaders, we can do this together.
Yeah, no, most definitely. Yeah, I feel you. And yeah, I think also, seeing.
Yeah,
please proceed.
You have employers that have policies in place, and so it looks very good on paper, but you really you need to be very intentional about implementing this in the workplace within the team, and really creating a culture within the organization that is conducive for everyone to actually be comfortable enough to say, what, this is what I'm actually going through. So I think really, it's very, very important that there is that level of intentionality that goes along with it, and really from the top, and I mean, we've seen part of the challenge is that you have line managers within organizations that actually do not understand mental health, do not understand the implications of really living with a mental health condition. So really it needs a concerted effort, and it must be a daily effort to ensure that that culture within organization actually changes and is conducive enough for people to feel comfortable without feeling fearful that if my manager knows that I am living with depression, you know what, I'm not going to get that promotion because I'm already going to be seen as, unstable, or, or all these, terrible labels that actually gets passed on to people living with a mental health condition.
Makina, you said
No.
culture. That's
Mm.
huge. How do we change that culture that the restaurant industry has always had of cutthroat, you work hard, you play hard, you put your head down, you work, you're in the kitchen 14 hours a day, 6 days a week. You're constantly under the gun, under the pressure, those are the things that we need to change as a culture. You're right, from the top down, that's the only way that's going to change. We have to have more conversations with those restaurateurs, those operators, those chefs that are running their kitchens to make sure that they understand, hey, I understand you have a busy day. We all understand. We've done this. But 1 hour from you as a leader to show that you care on a regular basis for your staff, to feel that comfortability, that is going to be huge. That positive return on that is going to be exponential. I guarantee it. And it's right. We have to have these leaders listen more, understand more, and kind of break through that cultural setting that we were all once part of. And as COVID happened, it exposed a lot. It showed a lot of negativity. It showed a lot of the hatred, the anger, the frustration that a lot of us were going through financially, but also mentally and socially. So you're right. Creating the culture, changing it from the top down is a necessity to ensure that we as a whole in this industry really address that mental health challenge.
No, very true, Chef. And I've been in organizations where I've seen how, as Nkini was saying, that they have all these policies in place on paper, but the staff, the general staff, can actually see through the insincerity of the management, that no action is being taken. There's not really any effort being made to to look after the well-being, the mental well-being of the staff. So yeah, I guess you're so right, Chef, that is very important that action be seen and actually be sincere as well.
Chef Tebogo, if I can jump in there, it's very interesting because one of the hospitality sector workers in the survey said, I get along okay with my manager, but the people in HR are the reason why the culture won't change. And when you delve a little bit deeper into it, they're sort of saying, we need younger people in senior leadership roles, in human resource management roles, because these old ways of doing things are so entrenched, because we've got, sort of ageist structures. Now, I kind of get what they're saying, but it doesn't mean that older managers can't absorb Gen Z ideology, or so in other words, I think there's almost an entrenched stigma in that. Now we're stigmatizing people according to their age category, or whatever. So I think, when stigma flows from the top to the bottom, now it's going from the bottom to the top as people are trying to find solutions. I think the key thing to remember is that most of the workers in our research said, I really wish my manager would take care of themselves. Then they could model good behavior for me, and I could pick that up, and I could know when I'm allowed to stop working. I could know how to balance my work home life. So managers as mentors, managers as helpers, and managers as psychologically safe people. But what was really interesting is that there was this big disconnect, not actually between me and my line manager, but the big disconnect was between my line manager and top management. So the business owner is the person that doesn't really get what's happening on the ground. So while we're starting to see some really positive shifts with line managers, top management still seems to be kind of separate, and in some ways, I won't say more inclined to stigmatize, but more inclined to do things in that established old way. Yeah.
Yeah, no, definitely. And personally, I've been through, a period in my life where I battled with that, with balancing my work home life, because as Chef also mentioned, the long hours, and I was once in an environment where anything could change. It was in the in-flight space, so anything could change. So my days were very unpredictable, and my wife couldn't understand that I don't know what time I'll be home. And
Mm.
so it became a problem over time, for me. But I had to deal with it and face that. But also in the industry, I mean, I go around and I interact a lot with the customers. And you find, some people in their workplace, there's some strange policies that actually makes life difficult for the staff. For instance, you find cooks in the kitchen that are not allowed to taste the food that they're cooking. It's. I mean, I don't know. It's nonsense. How do you cook without tasting your food? But the management doesn't allow them to, because it's taken as theft of some kind. So there are people in our industry that are going through, those kind of things, and it's actually, you can see, and also, the fact that also there's also a lot of people that are working with no contracts, that type of thing. So they don't know whether that day that work might be their last day, because they don't have anything on paper, nothing to, to solidify their space at that workplace. Yeah. Chef, you can also share
That, Chef?
from your experience
Sure.
in the industry, please.
My experience in the industry with my own mental health challenges has been a blessing. I was able to, when I finally grabbed hold of the situation and expressed what I was going through to my chef, like I said before, he's very sympathetic and empathetic. But then when the staff heard, hey, this is Chef Art's last day, I got courage enough, and I stood in front of the entire team, the night crew, cooks, dishwashers, stewards, whatever have you. And I told them what I was going through and why I was leaving the restaurant. And the mere power of me taking control of something that I had no control of created power within myself, but also created power within these individuals. They got the confidence enough to come at me and say, hey, Chef Art, can I talk to you privately, and express what they were going through. It gave them the courage then to be able to talk candidly with me, because they finally found someone that they can relate to. They heard a leader's voice saying they were having their own mental health challenge and they're stepping away from the restaurant. That moment right there was one of the most powerful moments I've ever had in my life, because of the return that I got from everyone else. The openness, the breaking down of barriers, and the comfortability. And now that I've left the restaurant itself, like, I continue want to do this because I know for a fact, if we reach one person, we've won. And if that person talks to another person and that continues on, that domino effect, we are now creating an environment, a culture of safety. We're creating a culture of acceptance. And that is something I think I'm taking from my past experiences and really putting into my present and in the future to ensure that these conversations that we're having are continuing. These moments of openness, understanding, data, experiences, is really having a positive effect, not only for us as individuals, but not just the hospitality industry, but as an entire industry, as everyone as a whole, because we all know everyone is dealing with something mentally. But then how do you get that confidence enough to pursue help? How do you get that strength from within to talk to someone and finally open up? And I think those are things that we as a whole can do. We can definitely have these conversations with our staff on a regular basis. I think having that 1 hour for us set aside daily or weekly will have profound positive effects. I think having people like ourselves who have been in the industry come into some of these establishments to talk about our own mental health challenges, what we've gone through, what we've done to get help, and what we're doing to continue our help. Like, that alone, I feel, is going to have a profound effect on anyone, just because now they see someone that they can relate to. They see someone that is just like them. And wait a minute, you're a chef. You're supposed to be hard. You're supposed to be tough. You can't cry. No, 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 no. That stigma, that has to be shed and broken to say, hey, I am human. I can cry. I can have these emotions. I can seek therapy because I need to get better for myself. So if I'm better for myself, I'm better for my staff, and I'm better for everyone else.
no, most definitely.
And it's amazing how people don't realize that actually, expressing those emotions, be it through tears, it is so empowering. You really gain so much more power. So I think it's really hugely important to, start changing the narrative. We need to create those safe spaces, as men within our social circles, within our families, within the organizations, that we operate in. And, as Art says, one person at a time, and really having these kind of, conversations, really goes a long way to start, getting a step closer, to this change, that's this paradigm change, that we would like to see in our society.
What I think is even more beautiful, Akina, is the fact that I'm here in the States, you're in South Africa, and we are all dealing with the same thing. We're all the same, right? Yeah. We have our differences, of course, but yes, we're all the same. We're dealing with this together. And I think as we do more of these, not only it's going to break through the stereotypes, not only just South Africa and the States, but all over, because we are all dealing with something. In the hospitality industry, it's the same thing day in, day out. It's all about routine. Yeah. We know this.
Thanks,
all routine, right? Yeah. Continuous, 6 days a week, 14 hours a day. You get in there, you get out. But that routine can be broken by adding something like this of positivity. That routine can be changed to create better environments and culture, like you said, creating from the top down. I think it's just amazing how our two worlds have intersected and collaborated on something that's such a powerful topic. So I thank you so much for having me on this. I just wanted to say that.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you.
Yeah, no, Chef, I can hear the fire in you and how, how passionate you are about this topic. And then, it is, I also talk to a lot of people in my line of work as well, and especially on this topic, because, people are going through a lot. And then, like you say, it is universal. And so it's an issue that we continue to tackle and continue to address, and also, be supportive to people around us who are facing challenges. And I think that's very, very, very important. And I think we're nearing the end. Doctor, would you like to have any closing comments?
I think what I'd like to say is, let's catch the chefs young. Let's have universal interventions at every level of every organization, mental health sensitivity training, self-care check-ins for everyone at every level. If your boss is checking in, you'll be checking in. Check in on each other. We're so worried about the exit interview. What about the staying interview? What about the interview that you have to ask people, hey, why are you still here? What can I do to keep you? I value you. You're important. How are you valuing yourself? So I think that sort of thing, I think check-ins and training sensitivity at every single level would just help open up the conversation. We talk about talking about suicide and saying it's going to become contagious. Well, if that's going to become contagious, why doesn't mental health become contagious? Why doesn't a focus on the things that we can't see become contagious? Just like our hygiene practices and our paychecks.
True. And Guinea, would you like to have any parting words?
Yeah, absolutely.
Share?
I think we whether we are parents, we are brothers, we are spouses. Let's challenge ourselves. To how we socialize, how we raise, our boy children. It starts there. Let's start breaking, those stereotypes at that level. Let's change the narrative. I mean, now I know it's a social media thing, this hashtag proof of life. We need this hashtag proof of mental health. Those check-ins and ensuring that we are creating safe spaces, for all of us to be able to, comfortably come forward and say, you know what, I need help. This is what I'm dealing with. This is a type of mental health condition I'm dealing with. In South Africa, as I said, a third of our population is living with a type of a mental health condition. You look at the dynamics within our society, we live in a very, aggressive and a very violent society. There's violent criminal activities that are taking place on a daily basis. There's socioeconomic issues, and there's drug you know, and alcohol abuse issues that, you know, we are dealing with in our society. And so really for us to say, you know what, we are human, and, you know, let's feel comfortable to come forward and seek help for a mental health condition. You know, one can actually lead a very, you know, fruitful and really, you know, satisfying life, you know, with a well-managed and treated mental health condition. It is possible.
Wow, no, thank you so much for that. Yeah, very powerful. Yeah, and also, you know, I think it's also important to, you know, to also spread the word out there, especially to employers, to know, to make sure that like managers and team leaders go for training as well, you know, to be able to handle, mental issues that may arise, or maybe better yet, to be able to identify them earlier on, and to be very, supportive and compassionate and considerate of their staff, and then, you know, treat people, you know, with respect and dignity. And then, you know, make sure that, you know, they work in a safe space and a happy place where they can be free to express themselves, and not, you know, be afraid to, you know, of stigmas and what people will say, or, you know, any backlash that we might get from anyone. And also to create that, you know, that private, confidential space for employees to be able to, you know, to be able to talk and then open up. But yeah, I would like to thank you so much, my guests, and everyone who joined the call. And I hope we can continue and have another one shortly before the year ends, or maybe even next year. We'll see. But I think thank you to FairKitchens as well. I mean, it's a powerful platform, and that I also preach about everywhere I go, whenever I do my trainings. So I'm loving the work that, you know, FairKitchens is doing, and reaching out to people out there, not only the chefs, but to everyone out there who might be needing help or just needing some words of encouragement, and also seeing other people are overcoming their mental issues. Thank you so much, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having us. Thank you.
so
No,
much.
it was a pleasure. Thank
Bye-bye,
you.
everyone.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye now.
Thanks, everyone.
Okay.
Bye.